Welcome, everyone. If you don't know me already, my name is Jessica Medina. I am a former lawyer turned accredited financial counselor, and I help lawyers figure out the money so they can pursue their true passions no matter the salary. And today, I'm so excited for this Zoominar because we have Annie Little with us. She is a career transition expert. She's been doing this for so many years, also a lawyer herself. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we will get into the meat of today's presentation, which is talking about career transitions and specifically all of those nice financial aspects. So Annie, welcome.
Yeah, hello. The money stuff, the best part. So I'm Annie Little. My company is JD Nation. I've been coaching lawyers on career everything since 2012. And I'm here. I'm excited to have let's use a corporate word, the synergy between Jessica and me, the money side and then the career side, because there is so much overlap, as you guys are all so familiar with. So I'm excited. Bring your questions and all that stuff, everybody.
Yes, this is going to be as interactive a session as you guys like. A lot of my presenters often have a lot of information that they want to make sure that you guys get to digest. But Annie is really special. Number one, she shoots from the hip. And number two, she's been doing this so long. She's really great at looking at particular situations. So if you guys have questions while we're moving along, I'm actually going to be watching the chat this time. I'm multitasking. I'm very impressed. So if you have questions about anything that we talk about or specific questions for Annie with respect to career transitions you may be considering, we're happy to take those as we go through. So just to get started, right, the first thing that people think about when they are considering a career transition, especially in the lawyer space, right, is the salary negotiation. This is like the boogeyman that, freaks everyone out about potentially changing what they're doing right now. For many of us, we might have gone straight through school, straight to law school, straight into our first job. There was no negotiation. It maybe was a law firm, it's lockstep, nobody gets anything different. So you might not have those skills already, but when you're making a jump, salary negotiation becomes something that people say you should be doing. So Annie, what are some of your best tips for a negotiation that you actually feel good about?
Oh, yeah. So I think what can help you feel the best as you're going into a negotiation is confidence. I know it sounds kind of like wishy-washy, but I'm going to tell you how you get that confidence. Because I think, or I know with a lot of us, it's the uncertainty factor, right? Because they're not saying, oh, this is the range that we pay in, unless you're going to like a NOUT firm and you're going in at a certain level. But let's presume that's not what's happening. And what I find is really useful is to find your absolute floor, like the lowest offer for overall compensation, not just salary, so that you know what your floor is, so that you can walk away when you need to. Because, I don't want to say there's never a time, because, there are mental health considerations as well, but you don't want to be surprised by taking a job where you actually end up making less, like netting less than you are at your current job. So to avoid that situation, you got to know where your floor is. And you find that, which I'm sure Jessica has talked about many times, is, figure out what like your monthly, obligation is, like your monthly nut, like what do you have to make to pay that off, and what sources of income do you have to do that? So finding that out, and then doing, it's tough doing your research, because if you're going into legal stuff, it's kind of a black box, but there are ways to get some ideas. And then something that I think we're all very hesitant to do is to actually consider how much we're worth, like how much we can actually earn based on the value we can provide. And so part of that is understanding and compiling your experience kind of like in data points, right? And this is especially important if you're trying to get a raise internally, because that's a completely different negotiation than going externally, which is generally what we talk about. But I just like to also say that at the beginning, because invariably I get a question about like counter offers. And I'm like, no, like either you're leaving or you're staying. And because if you're going to leave, that's a completely different negotiation. And if you take that offer and bring it back internal and say, well, I've got this offer to do something else, you're effectively forcing the hand of your current employer, and they're going to give you what they want out of desperation, but then they're going to kind of hate you. They're going to treat you differently. And, I'm told by recruiters even that they will start actively trying to replace you because you've just given them like a long runway to do so.
Ooh, we're going to have to do a whole nother training on the internal career transition.
Right? It's how to negotiate that. Different. It's totally different. There's a totally different set of trade-offs, right? So knowing what your floor is and then understanding like, and this is hard for lawyers for some reason, but figuring out like really like what is like the top sort of range and being open to that, your top edge of the range being lower than what actually is out there. It's entirely possible that you go out, you get an offer, you're doing your negotiations, which we'll talk more about, and they'll give you an offer that's higher than you ever thought you would get. And your impulse is to just take it. And you should not. Which is, so it's really tough because we lawyers have like loss aversion, you know, and so we're worried about losing like that perceived safe income that we have now. But that also prevents us from seeing what we could potentially earn. That's a lot more as opposed to just a little bit more. And that doesn't happen.
If they open door number 1 and I see what's behind door number 1, how am I supposed to pick door number 2 if I don't know what it is? Oh my goodness. I would have died on that show. I literally would have been the person who like finishes after 1 round. I would go home with my $15 and I would be so happy. That would be the end of it.
The pain of losing that $15 was twice as rough as the joy of winning the 15.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about the, let's say you did get an offer. What do you usually do with your clients when they receive that first offer? Because most places, gosh, some of them will ask, you know, will go the route of asking you, well, what are you expecting for this position? Or what is your range? And if you have thoughts about that, I'm sure people would love to hear
that. Yeah, let's start there because that is like the thing I hear the most. And even for me, like that's like that gives me like my chest tightens because you're like, well, wait a second. Because really, I think where a lot of that like tenseness comes from is like, how the fuck am I supposed to know what your budget is for this job? And so what's happening is they're trying to get a sense of how much they can lowball you when they ask you that question. So, because here's something that we're never really taught. And I was a psych major, so I like nerd out on this stuff just for fun. And what's interesting is that when oh my God, I'm like losing my train of thought because I'm like so excited.
There's so many people here. It's very exciting.
I know.
So, yeah, when somebody asks you, hey, what are you thinking at the range?
Yeah, what are you thinking at the range? So at the beginning, employers' goal is to fill this position at the lowest possible cost. Okay. So they're trying to figure out what's the least we can spend to get a decent butt in the seat. And so that's where they start. And so we just need to be aware of that when we're coming in, that they're trying to get someone as cheaply as they can. And what I tell my clients is we're not going to help them do that. We're not going to help them to lowball you and change like the dynamic into one where it's like a race to the bottom, because that's not helpful for anyone. Nobody's going to be happy in that situation, even the employer ultimately, because they're going to hire you and you're going to be pissed from the beginning. But the other thing is, okay, what you want to do is you want to change over the course of your interview by presenting the value that you have to them. Their mindset shifts from, we just need to get someone in here who's really cheap, to, oh my God, this person is way better than we even imagined we can get. And they're going to go and say, what's our budget for this? Because we can't let this person go. Like, how much can we throw at this person? And so that's what I try to get people to focus on during the interview process, is not so much, how do I hedge on the numbers? And we'll talk about that too. But, you know, your job is to be the best possible candidate that they see for this position, such that their analysis changes. And that's where you've put yourself in the best possible position, because it works both ways, right? Because you're in the position to get the job, because you're presenting yourself in a way where they're like, oh, damn, I didn't even know we could get somebody like who had all these skills, right? And then the next thing is they're like, oh, we're willing to pay. We're willing to pay whatever we can, like, to keep this person. So that's your main job in the interview still. But this is why I'm getting like all tied up in knots, because the big question that comes up that everyone gets hung up on is, so what's your range, or what are your salary expectations or whatever. And so going back to that tense feeling we have, we're like, how am I supposed to know what this job pays? You can actually say that in a way. You can say, well, I'm still learning a lot about the job, and I'm learning about, your company. And so at this point, I'm not really sure what that range could really look like. So I'd really like to learn more before I begin to like figure that, before I can even figure that out. But is there a range that you guys are working with that you can share with me? And they may not. Some people don't care, and they're like, oh yeah, this is our range. But also, so you get that range, and this is a tough one, because if it's super duper low, it's probably not a fit. But if it's one where you're like, I want to be paid more, there is room. Like, that's just like the budget they're given, that's the range. But if you get them into that mindset shift of being this person that they are like thrilled to have, there's more money available.
We think of that as, that's the starting offer.
It's the starting offer.
If you have and if their starting offer is a lowball offer, maybe you don't want to work there. Maybe that's not a place that actually sees the value in this position, because they're not willing to pay someone to do the work. And maybe that's not work you want to be doing. And then separately, when they give you the range, that is an excellent place to start. I feel good about starting there. And then you go back and talk to Annie and get the next part of the salary negotiation process.
You do. When they give, and I love that you say that's like the starting offer. So when you get that starting offer, and they're like, what do you think? Then you're like, thank you so much. I'm super excited about this. Is it okay? I need to talk this over with my partner, with my family, with myself, like I need some time to think about it. Is it okay if I get back to you on Monday, or whatever the deal is? Because the next part that's super important is that your response is in writing, in an email. And for one, it's so easy for people to be like, that's not what we said, and I thought you said this. So there's that element. We're lawyers. We love to CYA anyway. Document.
Oh, document. Yeah.
Right. But from a practical perspective, it's really, really helpful to have it in an email so that it can be distributed to all of the decision makers. Because it's not, let's take a big firm, for example, because that market is insane right now, and they're just trying to hire people. And so you go through the interview, and you're probably going to talk to someone at a partner level who's busy AF, and they're like, yeah, this person's fine, hire them. And so they extend an offer to you, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to like consider it. And then you come back. That partner doesn't want to be in on the decision. He just wants it done. And so they're going to be like forwarding that email to like HR and other people, and the people who are in charge of the money. And then they're going to send the final email where they're like, okay, we're going to extend, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And the partner just looks at it. It's like rubber stamp. When can they start? Otherwise, if you're doing on phone calls, it's the game of telephone. Well, I thought you said this. Well, we can't go back to the partner now because they've already approved it. So putting it in writing makes it super clear to everyone. They can pass it to everyone who needs it. And then they may want to hop on the phone with you afterwards. That's fine too, depending on what they say. But it's funny because a lot of people, we hear that offer and it's so tempting to just say, I accept. We
want it over. We want the whole process over.
Right. Please just end it. But thinking of being in that moment too, we're not thinking logically in that moment. Oh, yeah. So, and I'm one of those people that I'm like all about being excited and optimistic. So I'm like, let's allow ourselves to feel that awesome like relief of getting the offer, and also giving us the space to not make a decision right then. Right. Yeah. So you'd be like, yes, I got the offer. And then you can go tell everyone you got the offer. And then you can give yourself until like the next day to sit down and see what they've said and what you want. And you'll just be going back, for the most part, you're going back to the research that you did at the beginning of the process. And I don't know, Jessica, you tell me, like when you're working with people and they know they want to switch jobs, whatever, whether it's another legal job or whatever, do you have them figure out like what kind of pay they need before they even start applying to jobs and look at jobs through that lens?
So it really does depend on, because I primarily work with lawyers who are interested in a career transition, and primarily lawyers who want to take a pay cut. But because they are in that position, there's already a lot of stress involved in it. And depending on whether their hair is on fire and they have to get out immediately, or we have some time to really work some different scenarios and to figure out, just like you were saying, right? We approach it from what is the baseline that you need to survive, and survive is different for different people, right? So we figure out what that is. We figure out whether any of the jobs that they are interested in actually fall into that range, right? For reasonable people. And that is just for us also a starting point. I think it was really interesting, Annie, that you were talking about. I think a lot of people expect this kind of negotiation in-house. They expect this kind of negotiation, maybe even with law firms, because they do have some wiggle room, especially with the lateral market. But when I went from the law firm into the government, there's this assumption, well, there is no negotiating, right? They have the HR, it's all run by OPM, and like everything is very regimented.
Your GS level.
Exactly. There are places where you can negotiate, even if money is not, even if base salary isn't where they have the wiggle room, but you have to have the guts to ask for things. And that's something, that I also wanted to get into with you, because salary negotiation is one thing. And we say salary negotiation, it's actually a negotiation of all of your compensation package, which can have non-salary aspects to it. And so, right, so salary is just one piece of the puzzle. What other aspects, financial or otherwise, do you have your clients consider when they are thinking through these transitions and when they are starting, kind of their job hunt and their job negotiation?
Yeah, because for me, that's like super important, because yes, the base salary, it's super important, right? Because that like that's the money that's going to be coming in that you can use to pay your bills. So that's important. And then like sort of associated with that, like you were saying, I just want to touch on, like, there are other things that employers can do that you wouldn't expect. For example, nonprofits, they generally cannot budge on like the base salary. But if you can give reasons why you need more, because like you're leaving a job where you're giving up a bonus or whatever, you're moving and it's in a more expensive area, so you can work at this place, they have budgets for like signing bonuses. And pretty much I don't know about the government, but like nonprofits and everyone else, signing bonuses are a thing. And yeah, it's a one-time thing, but if it's especially helpful if you know that you will be getting raises, there's opportunity for advancement. It can be like that little bridge that gets you there. So
some agencies do have signing bonuses. I know the Securities and Exchange Commission did, because that's where I ended up. It was nothing compared to my law firm bonus, which is what we negotiated. I would wait for instead of starting at the SEC and not getting my law firm bonus, right? But the timing was the negotiation, which a lot of people were saying, oh no, you have to start on this day because the whole new class is starting on this day and our budget is going to be cut on this day. And if you don't come in, you might not still have an offer. There were good negotiators on the other side because they were all lawyers too. And so these are the people I was working with, but there really is, there is room everywhere, but you have to be willing to ask.
You have to be willing to ask. And so some other things that, and these are like not sexy. And I actually have a question for you that a client of mine asked, that I'm going to write it down before I forget. Oh, and it's already written down. Go me. But one thing that's really easy to ask and it has like a bigger impact on you as the individual than it does on the company, and it's easy for them, is to have your 401k vest right away. Because you'll be like, okay, I want my because they'll say, oh, your 401k vests in 3 to 6 months, whatever. And you can say, hey, how about we get that to vest right away? And they'll always say, oh, I don't know, I'll go check with our plan administrator. And I haven't had nobody come back saying, no, we can't do that.
Yeah, so that's a plan administrator issue.
Like, no, they're like, yeah, it's up to you guys if you want to let them vest or not.
That's a company loyalty issue.
It's just like you say 401k and they're like, oh. Same thing with like health insurance. If there's any sort of thing there, like, oh, you become eligible for the life insurance at this point. And these again are like loyalty type deals. And so it's not a huge cost to them, but it makes a really big difference to you as the individual. So, and these are the things that come in. You're pulling on these things that are important to you that you want to factor in from your very beginning analysis, where you're like, why am I leaving this job? What are the costs, financial, and what are the costs non-monetary, and this can be like mental health, commute time, insurance, or, all these sort of wishy-washy sort of things that, because they're not always, reducible to a number that goes into your bank account every month. But again, they have a really big impact on you. And so what I have people do is when we list out like the monetary, our bills, the things we have to pay, and then also these other non-monetary costs, and then I have them rank them. So like what, given your dream scenario, you would make this much in salary, and then here's your floor. And then you would have all of these benefits. But if you couldn't have all the benefits, let's put the ones you want the most at the top. And so before you're already in like excitement puppy mode, you've done this analysis way at the beginning, and then you can come back and say, okay, I know that they don't have anything to give on the salary, but I have these costs. I'm going to ask for a signing bonus in this amount. I also know that I need this, and I need a commuting budget or whatever. Like say you
or
take the
remote
train,
work, right?
or
Maybe
remote. Oh my gosh, of course, remote. I don't even mention that anymore because it's so. But that used to be like a big one. Flexible work schedule. And if they're going, and in that same vein, if you're going to a place where they are switching like fully to remote or whatever, something you can ask for, say, hey, my laptop is like 10 years old. Like I need, I need like 2,000 for a new computer modem upgrade. You could ask for like not a stipend, but like how they'll pay for your phone bill. Mm-hmm. You could have them pay for like your high speed internet, where you can get reimbursed for that as like a business expense. So that's another thing that when I'm talking about the costs, like in terms of financial costs, the things we don't think about as much are like parking costs. Like my husband saves so much money not having to park in downtown Wilmington, Delaware. Like it's because that's where all the banks are and like all the lawyers are, and they charge a ton. And since he's been working from home, it's like that's hundreds of dollars a month. And so if you're going from a place where you are working remotely to a place where you're going to have to go in a couple days a week, you're not thinking about the parking costs, especially because it's like, is it worth it to get the monthly pass or to pay as I go? And that's something that your law firm, you can talk to, just like how they'll do like those BS, like gym membership things. Nobody cares about those. Make it a parking membership thing, or like a gas allowance, or, whatever it is that you use for transportation, or whatever it's going to take for you to get your work situation up to like functional level, it was more common like at the very beginning, but if you're moving jobs, especially, it's a great way to do it and just say, hey, I'm not outfitted for fully remote work. What do you think about X number of dollars, kind of like a move, a relocation stipend, right? Where it's like, I need to buy a new computer, I need a printer, and a mesh net for my internet. And I think I priced it out, it's going to cost about, $2,500. And they'll be like, okay, because that's just like a signing bonus,
Yeah. And I think
these
are such interesting and specific things for people to really get into the weeds on. And it is so worth it, because knowing that, your company bought your laptop and pays for your Wi-Fi, there's something about, it just feels good every month. It's like that good feeling that you get every month. And, one of the things that I do when I'm working with my clients, specifically when we're talking about career transitions, we do something a little bit similar. Obviously, I'm a financial counselor, so do we list out the bills? Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
But we get down to a level, and I do an entire training on this golden handcuffs concept in particular, and that's going to be next month's Zoominar. We'll be looking at unlocking the golden handcuffs, and I'm going to be walking you through my process with Elena Deutsch, who also talks about the mindset piece of it. But thinking about how much does it actually cost you to have this job that makes you unhappy? And tallying up how much do you spend on things that are only job related, right? Parking in your very fancy building, having your children at a daycare that is close by to your work, not close to your home, commuting costs, eating out at lunch, because there is no way that you can pack a lunch in the morning for you and your children and be able to eat anything that is, normal, right? Dinner every night, because when you work at a law firm, you often work through dinner, right? And so thinking through, that's just stuff related to your job, not even including the things that you spend money on because you are unhappy in your job, right?
Retail therapy,
The retail therapy,
actual therapy.
which probably should continue after your transition, at least for a little while, just to make
It
sure that
should.
everything sticks.
It just might get like dialed back over time.
Right, or part of a new healthcare package that you're getting, right? But also thinking through, where is all of the money that you're spending to keep yourself in this job going? I had a set of clients who spent a third of their income on things related to their high pressure, high stress jobs, because they were at them 24 hours a day. They had 3 children, so they needed nannies. They were paying for school because of where they had to live. They were paying for commuting costs. And all in, it was over $13,000 a month. And so when you see those kinds of numbers and you realize, wow, so if I didn't work here, I wouldn't need to be spending 13,000 a month. Maybe I would be spending something closer to 1,000 a month. That's a huge window of opportunity for other types of work that don't demand that kind of a salary, but you've got to actually look at it. And I love that you walk your clients through that kind of an analysis. I think it's so important.
Well, it's so great because that's what I kind of fell into when I was at my job and was like, and I just had, I had all these perceptions like, I could never give up 6 figures because I have 6-figure loan debt and I have a mortgage and I have all this stuff. And then, I wanted to have, I was about to start planning to have kids and all that. And I was just like, in addition to like the money thing, right? It was, we crunched the numbers and it was like, I'm going to have 0 take home pay once I put daycare into the thing to go work at a job that I fucking hated. I'm like, that just didn't add up. But then there was also this kind of story that I had accepted at where was that it was, I'm a successful woman, I've gone to law school, I have the degree, I'm making the money, I'm like doing it. And a successful woman doesn't just quit to stay home with her baby. Didn't matter that that's what I had always wanted to do. I had also always thought I wouldn't be allowed to, because either I'd be too broke or I'd be too successful. Like there was no winning, right? And to be able to see like, well, babe, this just doesn't make any sense because I'm already miserable. And then I'm going to be extra miserable because I would rather be with my kid than at this job I hate. And I'm using all of my extra money to pay for that. Whether it was a nanny or a daycare, it was the same. It was awful. And so I was like, wow. And I found pretty soon after I wasn't the only 6-figure income earner to quit entirely when they started having kids, because it costs you money to be in that job, in that situation. And for some people, it's worth it. Like if I loved because then I started doing this and then I did get a nanny,
This is worth a nanny.
But I also wasn't like getting a nanny like 50 hours a week. It was like a nanny for like 10 to 12 hours a week. It was a totally different thing. And so being able to look at it that way it like blew my mind. And I mean, when you take your clients through that, I imagine it's equally as eye-opening because we just don't look at it that way. It's just like, well, this is what I just got to do. I just got to do it.
It's a very different lens when you are allowed to step outside of your current reality and imagine what life would be like if you actually weren't working where you are currently working. What kinds of things would change? And for some people, not much would change. And so, there might be other more advanced strategies that we put into place that we think about, right? One thing to always consider, I'm working with, my entire email list is getting a student loan repayment strategy series to figure out the best student loan repayment strategy for them. And it is very, very dependent on their income streams, compared to their debt load. And one thing that people forget is if you have federal loans and you take a pay cut, your monthly payment goes down. It will not remain $2,500 a month, right? Unless you've refinanced them, and then we will have to talk. But right, these are things that we take into account when we're thinking through a transition. There's all of these levers that get pulled. And when you have a day job, it can be hard to see all of the cascading effects that will happen when you actually put one of these transitions into place. But it's not, you don't just get there by grit. You don't just have to grin and bear it and survive it. You actually can find a way that you can maintain your lifestyle and your happiness and your career fulfillment and just move all the pieces of the puzzle around so that everything fits together in a better way. But we got to be able to see what the pieces look like. Right? That's the you got to look at the pieces. Oof.
What you said really resonates like about the grit. It's we don't just get there by white knuckling, because that was how I started, because we see the numbers in a certain way. Like I knew what my debt load was, like, and my husband had the same, and and I'm like, and all we could see was like we're both making a ton of money, and we're still like we don't see any other, like, how could we survive making less? And honestly, it was asking that question and not letting it just be rhetorical, right? That's the hard part, I think, because we're so in it. It's like, there's just like, there's no way. And it's just too fantastical to even imagine, right? And so, and I think for you and I both, we have the benefit of people having had that switch kind of flip at least a little bit, because until that switch flips, you're not willing to change. It's still impossible. It feels impossible for you. But, and nobody likes looking at their numbers unless, if I want to go in and see how much I have in like my investment accounts, that feels good. But when I go and look at my other accounts where I owe stuff, I'm like, barf, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to, like, when I have to pay like my business bills every month, I'm like, oh, gross, but there's so much power in it. And I'm almost always pleasantly surprised, when I get really down into it. You can see like, how much am I paying each month on something? And then look at it and, oh my God, when I was a lawyer, so much of it was on like clothes and shoes, like online shopping, and like these little dopamine hits to get me through the late nights, right? And the things that would help me get out of bed in the morning to put on a new outfit. That's literally what I had to do to keep going.
So you have done this for hundreds and hundreds of lawyers, Annie. Tell us, in your experience, what makes for the best transitions?
The best transitions.
Like, who are the happiest after they've completed their transition? Like, what did they avoid, or what things did they make sure that they did to, land well and feel good about the whole process?
Yeah. And this is a tough one, because when you said who were the happiest, I have pictures of people who are my happiest. And, and this, you've said this stuff too. Everybody has very unique situations and different needs and all that kind of stuff. But I will say the people who who feel the best after they've made a transition is those that are willing to get super honest with themselves and willing to actually look at, what is it that I need? Why am I unhappy? And what's the source of that? Is that something that I can control? Is it something that, like for me, I was like, I can't control the legal industry, and that's my biggest problem. I fucking hate everything about it. If it were all different, I'd probably still be a lawyer, but I was just like, this isn't feasible. But I would say some of the happiest people that I've worked with have ended up making very like small transitions, like where they were like, I never want to do billable hours. I'm never working for a law firm. I'm never doing this. I'm never doing that. I'm like, I hear you. Now let's go look at your values, look at your strengths, look at your soft, do all like just the foundational stuff so we can see what we're working with here. And then you get into it and we start exploring things, and they definitely try it. That's the other thing. Just being open-minded to trying things and to also retrying things sometimes. And some of my clients, they're like, yeah, I got this offer. I'm like, it feels really good, but it looks really similar to what I was doing before that I hated. And so that's where some of like, it's kind of like a really tricky spot for people, but that's where like the coaching can be really helpful, because it's like, okay, like, what's the difference though? Like it looks the same, but it feels different. So let's unpack why that is, and just as much as we're like, we're wedded to this idea of being a lawyer, and it's really hard to shed that when we're ready. Some of us get into this spot where we're like, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. Or I don't want to work in a law firm anymore. And so we try all these other avenues and we try, and then we're like, you know what, actually, it wasn't the law firm per se. It was this one person I was working with, or it was this type of law, or now I have my own clients, and it's, it's just kind of all these like little things that change for them as they're experimenting, allows them to find, it's kind of like, I think about, we were talking about babies all the time, right? But you remember those like little like boards that have like shapes in them, and your kid is like just sliding the shape until it fits in. That's kind of how the most successful people I work with go about it. It's messy. I know you want a direct path, but the people who are really willing to just like pick up a couple shapes, like, well, I've never tried this before. And they're like, I can't do it, Annie, because I don't know enough about it. I've never done it before. And I'm like, just start trying to fit it in a hole. Just see where it fits, how it goes. Oh, and it's slow going. We'll pick up another one. You can do two things at once, And so the people that are willing to do that, and then to really stop, this is the really hippy dippy part of it. It's hard for us if we've been in like the situations you were talking about, where it's like hair on fire, got to get out, abusive, toxic workplace, something like that. What happens a lot in those situations is that our self-trust has been ground down. And so when we get a job offer that feels really good and the people seem really great, we're like, what's off about this? Because I think that this feels and looks really good, but that can't possibly be true, because I've been told over the past several years that my intuition is shit, that what I think is the right approach to this problem is usually wrong, which is not always the case, right? But we're so used to being piled on in that way that we can no longer, trust these. And it's because there's not a lot of logic sometimes, but that's what I hear a lot. It feels
we were
really
supposed to love the law, and we don't like our law job. We're obviously bad at making decisions. We shouldn't be trusted with our own career.
Right. Like, I went to law school thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. I worked at this firm and it's awful. It's nothing like I thought. And it's because I'm the loser, that I didn't know what it was going to feel like to be a lawyer until I became a lawyer. No. And so, as much, and I don't talk about like the nuts and bolts of the career transition stuff quite as much, because lawyers can do all that. Like, we are executors, like my program, there's a curriculum. People can work through that on their own time, at any time, with or without me. But it's the in-between stuff where they've worked through it and they think they found something and they're like, what do I do? Is this right? Is this not right? And once they have the money piece filled in, it's the bulk of it really comes down to, can I trust my intuition on this? Is there really another shoe that's about to drop? Or is this really a worthwhile, risk? Also, and then in that analysis, what comes out is, okay, it is a risk and it might not work out. Do you believe that you could recover from that? Yes. Yes, yeah. You can. Is it going to suck? Yeah. And then you look back though, like every time you've had something that didn't work out the way you expected, as cheesy as it sounds, you learned a shit ton. And you were able to use that to inform yourself going forward. And so it's like that scary, kind of like, I always like abuse like the dating and love analogy with careers, but it's like, if you're willing to put yourself out there and be a little vulnerable and try things, you're going to get feedback, and sometimes it's going to be good and sometimes it's not, but you're much more likely to be happier sooner the more vulnerable you're willing to be.
Yeah,
and open-minded.
And I think your point about that some of the happiest clients that you had just made kind of small shifts in their perspective more than anything else. I had a client, we were trying to figure out, can she leave her big law job? She was married. These are the same folks with the $13,000 a month of golden handcuffs, feeling very, very tied to what's going on. And we actually determined, you know what, if you want to put 3 kids through private school from kindergarten through college, yeah, you should probably stay exactly where you are, because that's going to be tough otherwise, unless you want to move, unless you know, are willing for it to go to public school, you know, we're going to have to give somewhere. And just knowing that she was going to work every day for her children, because it was her core value to
Yes.
give them a certain type of education that she and her husband did not have. That made going in to work every day that much easier. It was so clear why she was doing it. She no longer had to worry, should I love this? It doesn't matter, because she knew exactly why she was doing it. She knew exactly how long she had to do it for. And she ended up getting another job at another firm, making even more money, because now she was in, and she was in 100%, because she knew exactly why she was doing it. And so just sometimes having that clarity, that is what you actually need to be able to make good decisions that you feel aligned with, right? And that's what you're missing, because you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You don't know why you're subjecting yourself to all of this.
Or your why has changed, which is okay too.
Yes. So I love that. Sometimes it really is just kind of like a change in your perspective. You just need a little bit of help seeing it. And the thing about, you know, yeah, maybe you'll fall down somewhere and you'll pick yourself back up. This is a marathon, right? Not a sprint. Your career is not a sprint. You're going to have 40 years working. And a lot of lawyers don't go on to be things other than lawyers. Like, a lot of lawyers just kind of stay lawyers for their entire career. It's okay to phase things in your career, and we figure out, right, how to phase things on the financial piece. Because I tell all of my clients, we can't do everything simultaneously. Like, I don't know, unless you, yes, go out and make partner right now. And yes, then you can do it all simultaneously on whatever timeline you want. But otherwise, you know, if you have kids in daycare, you've got a mortgage, that's like multiple mortgages that you're carrying, right? You got student loan debt, you got all these things going on. We might not be able to get to everything right away, but we will get to everything in due time.
And having that, like you said, having like that end in sight, like knowing what it is, because that's something that my clients who want to transition out of law, they want to, like, they all say this, because at first it's the scary part of, well, what will I do? You know, because it's like, it's just, I have no idea. And they have to experiment, and then they figure it out, and they're like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I cannot go to my law job every day. It's awful. It's mind numbing. I can't handle it. And I'm like, it's about getting that framing because I was the same way. But once I figured out what I was going to do, and I was like, I need this job for 9 months so I can put away a year's worth of salary. That was what we decided we were going to do. And we could live off, we were living off of one salary, my husband's salary. And then my salary went into the bank for me to like use for my business and live off of and all that stuff. So right.
I love it so much.
Right. And like, and, you know, and so it was, and then I was pregnant too. So it was like, you know, I had these other reasons for what I was doing. I was like, yeah, this sucks going to work every day, but I'm like, I just made some money to put towards my business.
Yeah, it feels so different going in every day. It really does change your entire attitude at work when you know that you're only there because you are choosing to be there. And if you didn't want to be there, you'd leave. If a better reason came along, you're out, and you feel really good about it. So Annie, I'm going to do a call for any last minute questions. Folks can pop them into the chat. But how can people work with you if this has just not been enough, and this is not enough Annie, and they want to get more?
If you need more, come check out my masterclass. It's free. It's on my website, thejdnation.com. And in the masterclass, it walks you through 3 strategies for identifying your transferable skills, because that's what so many lawyers tell me when they want to leave, especially like, I don't have transferable skills. Yes, you do. So that's like, I pull a few lessons from modules in my program and teach you right there. And then if you need more after that, you can join my program, make your next move through there. You can also get on the wait list for my one-on-one coaching, but that's probably not going to be opening up until 2022. So the only way to work with me right now is the program, which is so good. And I hang out on LinkedIn. So if you want to talk to me, DM me, comment on my posts, that's where Jessica and I play the most too.
It's true. Annie, can you pop the link for that masterclass into the
Heck
chat
yeah.
just so folks have it? For everyone coming up, like I mentioned, next month's Zoominar is going to be on unlocking the golden handcuffs. I'm going to be presenting with Elena Deutsch. She runs Women Interested in Leaving Law and is a wonderful coach who helps you think through all of those emotional issues that go along with trying to make a transition like this. And I help with the money piece. So we're actually going to be walking you through the framework that I take my own clients through, and we're thinking through what is a transition actually going to look like. But Annie, thank you so much for today. It is always such a pleasure to chat with you. You have been doing this for so many years, have seen so many lawyers through this process, and have so many amazing nuggets to share. Also, check out Annie's YouTube channel for all of the tips on salary negotiations, like what you're supposed to say when they actually spit out a number and you just have the face on, and all
So true. I
of the
forgot about that. Yes, my YouTube. I share way too much in my YouTube videos. I'm an oversharer. Go check it out, guys.
Yes, go you get all of the content. It's not as good as the masterclass, but it is a really, really nice starter.
Hey, if you want to piece it together, go for it.
But definitely check out Annie. And yes, come play with us on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone. We will see you next month at next month's Zoominar. And Annie, thank you again. It was so great seeing you.
My pleasure.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.